Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and help you engage with public policy in the great state of Texas. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness. And y'all, the legislature is heating up and Texans of faith are responding in big ways. Last week, we talked about the Public School Defenders Advocacy Day, and this week we're joined by several of the speakers and participants in the Preventing Gun Violence Advocacy Day. We first talked with Jasir Rahman, a student at Rice University, and the Texas Youth Academy coordinator with Team Enough, a gun violence prevention organization that he'll tell us more about. We also had a chance to talk with several other leaders and participants in the lobby day following the event on the steps of the Capitol. Gun violence is always such a hard topic because so many of the folks who show up have traumatic stories to explain what brought them to this work. We heard stories from Uvalde families. We heard from people who had family members take their own lives or who had friends involved in accidental deaths. And while we marched from First United Methodist Church to the Capitol with about 1,000 other advocates from across the state to rally on the South Steps, we passed by about 1,000 t-shirts with the names of Texans who needlessly lost their lives to gun violence as part of a giant Vidas Robadas display. It was a hard day, but I think everyone left motivated to remember why we do this work and to continue the work to advocate for a future where communities don't live in fear, to continue the work for common sense gun violence prevention solutions that will literally save lives. I want to give props to Texas Impact's gun violence prevention team for their work on this event, and Bobby Watson specifically for leading that team, and to the Texas Gun Sense Coalition for their work. If you want to learn more about Texas Impact's involvement or how you can get involved, check out the Action Center at texasimpact.org. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this week's content from the February 27th Gun Violence Prevention Advocacy Day. Joining us for this week's conversation is Jasir Rahman. He is with Team Enough. He serves as the Texas Youth Advocacy Coordinator. Jasir, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, that was a mouthful. We talked about it before we came on. That is a long title, but talk to us about Team Enough. Who is Team Enough and why did you choose to get involved?
Yeah, so Team Enough is Brady United Against Gun Violence's youth organization. If you're not familiar with Brady, it's named after Jim Brady, who was Ronald Reagan's Secretary of State, and he was a victim himself of gun violence. And so he and his wife, Sarah, threw themselves into the movement to help prevent other people from becoming victims. And the Team Enough program, I think it was started in 2018 after the Parkland shooting by victims from Parkland and then also youth advocates from across the country. And they do lots of grassroots organizing in chapters across the state. I think we're across the country. I think we're coming up on our goal is to get 50 chapters here soon across the country. And I have been working on expanding our stuff in Texas and making sure that we can get young people out to events like the Advocacy Day that's coming up tomorrow, making sure that we have folks on the ground and we're empowering youth to fight for public safety and common sense gun reform.
And so what's that advocacy work look like? I know we're partnering on the event this week. What types of events are you doing? What does it look like when you do it well?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is promoting that youth advocacy at the Capitol, kind of through events that like the Advocacy Day tomorrow. Of course, tomorrow's event is a coalition event, but I know in our other chapters where we're more established across the country, we have lots of Youth Advocacy Day training programs where we'll train young people from across their respective states. One example is Florida, is one of the more prominent ones, Florida, Virginia, and DC. We'll train them either over Zoom, or we'll just provide them information about the issue. What are the pieces of legislation that are being discussed in a legislature, and why do they matter? And then we'll train them also to how can they best talk with their legislators in order to convey their points, in order to be persuasive. And then we take them to the Capitol, wherever their legislature is, and then they get to meet with their legislators, talk with them directly. It's not like a patronizing experience because they have so much experience on the issue. They really become issue area experts. And so then they're able to inform each other about the legislative process. And then hopefully we're hoping that influences the process. A lot of other stuff that we do is much more informational based and much more locally oriented towards advocacy within respective cities. Like yesterday, I did tabling in support of the Advocacy Day by providing folks with information about, our priorities here, but then also ways that they can get involved, like emailing their legislators and stuff like that.
I want to talk to you in a minute about your priorities and the change you're hoping to make. But our folks a lot of times like to know why folks choose to get involved in the advocacy work that they do. So talk to us about your story. Why'd you choose to get involved in this type of work specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a young person, I think of my specific like age demographic, I think for me it all started with Sandy Hook. I was in the fourth grade. I was 9 years old, and I remember one of my, I remember that day in December. You're gearing up towards winter break, and my fourth grade teacher, we just completely stopped class, and we just have to take the whole day to decompress because a bunch of kids who look just like us were shot and killed in their elementary school. And I remember that being a very sobering day, but as a kid, you can just kind of walk it off, especially when there's nothing that's, directly affecting you. But then as I got into high school and beyond, I remember my freshman year, the Parkland shooting happened in 2018 when I was a freshman on Valentine's Day. And that was obviously shocking to the world, and a whole mass movement grew out of that. But more locally to me at my high school, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks afterwards, somebody brought a gun onto my high school's grounds as well. And fortunately, nobody was shot. There was no intent to shoot other people. But with that being so close, we could see the images. Like we were still seeing the images of the students fleeing their school at Parkland on, in our heads and on our phones and on our TV screens. We knew what that threat looked like, and so it caused extreme pandemonium, and it really changed how the school approached safety. We ended up implementing metal detectors and ID badges, and even after those were implemented, that still didn't stop other people from bringing in guns and other weapons to schools later on. So it was always a persistent threat. My brother went to middle school. He had, like, the middle school he went to had lots of community violence threats as well. And so at a certain point, I felt like I just needed to get involved because it was becoming way too personal for me. And so that's how I applied to the Team Enough Executive Council, which kind of oversees the programming of Team Enough. And they were nice enough to let me join on. And since then, I've been doing lots of work with them. And I think I stay in the work much more so because of just the relationships of the amazing folks that I've met. And just knowing that you're getting good work done with these people who are so dedicated. And oftentimes with survivors who've turned their pain to passion, I think it's just a really powerful thing.
I have a high school daughter, and I have a lot of opportunity to talk to her friends, and with various hats that I wear, a lot of opportunities to talk with young people. And I remember leading up to the election when I was talking with young folks and just asking them, like, what do you care about during this election cycle? Preventing gun violence kept coming up over and over again in ways that it certainly didn't with people of my generation and older. It really feels like this is an area that young people specifically care about, and young people are taking the lead. Is that or do you share that experience? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think that overall, I mean, when you look at the statistics, gun violence is now the leading cause of death for children, for people under eight, or sorry, it's the leading cause of death for folks who are 0 to 19. So if you're a teenager, if you're, a child, so we're the ones who are experiencing this the most out of any other age group. We obviously see threats to our schools when there's hundreds of school shootings that happen every single year, and there's threats that don't materialize into school shootings but still are disruptive, as I experienced. There's more experiences of suicide, of youth suicide. There's a mental health crisis right now that gun violence is directly implicated in, because actually suicides is the leading cause of death from guns. It's suicides. And so there's just so many issues where young people are on the front lines, and I think that we have made it's become a very personal issue because we see it every single day. And we know folks who have been shot and killed. And we always have that kind of looming threat in the back of our mind of our schools aren't a safe place to be. And if our schools aren't a safe place to be, I don't know what is. And so that's kind of driven a lot of youth action. It's just that direct threat. And the fact that, as you said, it's completely different from the way other generations have experienced it. And so we have to be the ones to take charge because we understand it in a completely different issue, or in a completely different way than previous generations.
You talked about your legislative priorities. You talked about training and preparing people to go to the Capitol. What's the ask right now? What are y'all hoping for?
Yeah, so when it comes to the Advocacy Day, we have four main asks. Three of them are kind of positive, what we want to strive for, and then one of them is more so defending against stuff that's coming down from people who want more permissive laws. So our three priorities that we want to have changed are: we want to implement safe storage and strengthen child access prevention laws in Texas. That's again specifically because, as I kind of talked about, 3/4 of school shooters get their guns from home. If you're under 18, and if you're under 18, you can't purchase a semi-automatic weapon or anything. but we know that people are getting their guns from home because they're not safely stored. And then similarly, most kids, when they commit firearm suicide, they use their parent's weapon. And it's because it's not safely stored. And your parent, I think that the mindset is people want to have a gun to protect their kid. But in these instances, if you're not safely storing it, that weapon that was meant for protection can be the very thing that ends their life. And for me, I think that's such an important issue. Our next priority is and also the that would be HB 528 is the bill for that. Next would be HB 1556, which is the raise the age statute. That was a really important piece of legislation for us after Uvalde in 2023 because the shooter was able to purchase a semi-automatic weapon at 18 and then use it to just commit this massacre at Robb Elementary School. And so that could have been prevented if we had, that kind of reasonable restriction of saying, hey, if you can't be trusted to drink alcohol, you can't be trusted with a semi-automatic weapon. And then our next priority is HB 230, which is related to community violence intervention programs, which basically it's just saying that when you have lots of at-risk youth, or you have lots of people who are prone to violence, we need to go and make investments into those communities to prevent violence at the source by creating new relationships among folks, by providing them with job training opportunities, by providing them new economic incentives and ways to, divert their energies in a way that isn't, crime related, that isn't going to be prone to violence. And it's been really effective in San Antonio. There was a 37% reduction in violence after they implemented that program. Same thing in Houston, there was a 13% drop. And so, yeah, I think that's our final priority, our main priority that we're asking for. And then we also go ahead.
Before you get to the defensive one, like those don't sound crazy. Those sound kind of common sense, mainstream, things that we can do to protect human life while not, restricting too much freedom. Quote unquote. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah,
These are just kind of common sense gun reforms.
Yeah, I think that they're all really common sense. If you look at the polling on this, I think the University of Houston recently put out a poll recently that said that like all of those proposals are like 80% plus popular amongst Texans. And then even among gun owners, it's like at a similar rate. So we're not making these crazy asks. I think that unfortunately the process has really been hijacked by interest groups like the NRA and also just the gun lobby and because ultimately it's a profit-driven business. You need to sell more guns. And so if you have less restrictions on who can buy guns, the gun lobby doesn't care. They're going to get the dollars the same exact way. If they're selling to somebody who's under 18, or if they're selling to somebody who's under 21, if they're selling to a school shooter, if they're selling to somebody who's using it for personal protection. And so that's why you have these narratives about you need a gun to be safe. So you need to have it by your bedside, even though that means that your child will have greater likelihood of getting that gun and using it against them. Because statistically, that's what happens more often than not, you know? So I think, unfortunately, there's this big wall that's been put up by these interest groups, but I want to take it back. And that's why the advocacy day tomorrow is called the Texas Majority to Prevent Gun Violence Advocacy Day, because it truly is a majority of folks who believe in common sense.
All right, I appreciate that. There was also one that y'all want to play defense on. So talk to us about that one.
Yeah, I think in general, we just don't want rollbacks. I think the biggest pressing issue for me is, again, as somebody who's a young person who's in or who was recently in high school and is working with lots of high school organizers, is we don't want, to arm teachers for protection. And we don't want to make more permissive kind of gun laws, because as we've seen in the past 20 years, things have only gotten more and more permissive, and we've seen rising gun death rates. Again, that's why only I think a couple of years ago did gun violence become the leading cause of death for children in Texas, is because of more permissive gun laws. And again, just getting back to like that kind of safe storage piece of it, I think people think, oh, it's common sense if you have a good guy with a gun. But look at Uvalde. We had resource officers there. We had a huge police response, and still over 20 people died. That's number one. Number two, I think, again, there have been instances already where we've seen teens will get guns at school. They'll take them from a school resource officer. They'll take them from, again, a teacher in some instances where you have folks who are armed on campus. And that just makes it all the more dangerous. I think we know that more guns doesn't make us safer. But again, that's that big lie that's been perpetuated by the gun lobby. So we really want to make sure that we're holding the line and we're not passing anything that's more permissive, because at the end of the day, it just is not safe.
This week, there will be a rally at the Capitol with about 1,000 people who will be rallying and advocating and meeting with legislators and doing all the things. But there are a lot of listeners. First of all, I hope we see a lot of listeners at the rally. But for those who aren't able to make it, what do you hope folks will be doing? How can regular listener throughout Texas support your work?
Well, I think first of all, I mean, I know I'm going to be coming up from Houston. I mean, it's still a 3 hour drive. Texas is huge. But we know, again, that it's a majority of folks, no matter where you are, you're in the Panhandle, you're down at the border, you're up here in Houston or you're in Austin. The majority of Texans believe in common sense. But we need to make our voice heard. We need to crowd out these voices from the gun lobby, from industry actors. And so I would just promote, this is kind of what I did yesterday at tabling is, send emails to your legislators, send them letters in support of this movement, even if you can't make it yourself up there. Because again, I would also love to see lots of our listeners here. But we know Texas is a big place. It's hard to make your voice heard in this little spot in Austin. But make sure to reach out to your legislators, because they, you don't think that they listen, but if the noise is big enough, they're going to listen. That's kind of what we're hoping for tomorrow too. And then also don't be afraid to organize locally. And it can just be as simple as making the ask to other, like if you're a parent, for example, if your kid's going to a friend's house, ask, do you have a firearm in the home? Do you have it safely stored? And it doesn't have to be this big taboo thing. And it's just about changing the culture and making them think for a second, hey, how am I storing this? Because unfortunately, as we know, I think just the other day, Ethan's bill, which is named after Ethan Sonk, who died because one of his friends had a firearm that was unsecured by their father, and he passed away from that. It's something that you can prevent. You don't need a big policy sweep. It's just about cultural shifts about how we handle firearms and how we promote public safety. So just talking with folks on the ground and organizing local initiatives as well, like at the school board level or at the city council level to promote more education, I think is something that often gets overlooked. We get really distracted by these big federal pushes, but it's a lot more feasible. And at the end of the day, that's how the NRA was able to organize, because they went state by state in these legislatures and they were extremely successful. But we can do the same thing through grassroots advocacy.
Love that. I know there are people who would like to get involved, so I'm going to give you a second here at the end to give us some closing thoughts or shameless plugs. Where can people find more information?
Yeah, so if you'd like more information about Team Enough, just go to teamenough.org or Brady's website will also provide information about stuff if you're not a young person like me. Also would definitely encourage folks to check out Texas Impact's website, because they do so much great work on both this issue and a whole host of other issues, and Texas Gun Sense, who is kind of leading the charge on this coalition movement for tomorrow. So if you go to those websites, you can learn more about our shared priorities, ways that you can get involved in Texas and beyond. And yeah, I would just say I know it's really difficult right now. I think that folks feel hopeless, whether you're in Texas and you're looking at the way the legislature is, or if you're looking at the federal level. I think it's really difficult, but I think as I am trying to, grapple with things, I know that it's pushes like these where it's grassroots, you're organizing, you're connecting with folks. I've met so many amazing people in this work, and I've connected with so many people who have similar experiences and similar fears, and they don't have an outlet to channel them. But once you organize together and you take collective action towards something, you're going to make people start to listen. And that's what we're hoping with tomorrow. And I hope that we can maintain this energy, because if you look at, the public safety committee from last session, the composition wasn't the way that we liked it, but we still ended up getting raised to the age passed in that committee. It didn't get passed further, but we just have to keep pushing and building on that progress, because our stories truly do matter.
I think it's important to remember that we do have to take a long-term view on this issue and so many others. And I am optimistic over the long term that we're going to get this done, because there are young leaders like you who are willing to put in the time and do this work. So, Jasir, thank you so much for the time today. I'll look forward to giving you a high five at the rally tomorrow. But thanks again, and we'll look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Hey friends, honored now to be joined by Nicole Golden, Executive Director of Texas Gun Sense, who did some incredible work pulling together this rally today. Nicole, first of all, 1,000-ish people out here, really great legislative visits going on. Reflections on today, how are you feeling?
I mean, first, a big reflection is that I didn't do it alone.
Right.
Texas Impact was a great partner. Moms Demand Action, Giffords, Students Demand Action. There were so many great partners doing this together, and we planned for months, but our vision was realized. And so that just shows if you get organized, what you can do.
Yeah.
You know?
I also been having a couple conversations about the number of young people who are out here today.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that and how this younger generation is really mobilized around this issue?
First of all, this is probably the single best thing that gives me hope right now is young people, and we've actually made it a priority at Texas Gun Sense to do more leadership building work with young people. And I think more showed up today than ever, to your point, than we've had. We've been talking about it for a long time, but I think what I think has worked is that we have not told them what to do, but given them a voice.
Right.
And then they come in with their messaging and their leadership skills, which are strong. They don't need us to direct. They want to be given a platform and a voice and a say in the direction of the movement. I think that's honestly how we've empowered them to be partners.
And it sounds like everybody's kind of working on along the same lines, that looking for common sense solutions. The things folks are lobbying on right now are not, out of the mainstream. Talk to us about like how that decision gets made to focus on things that are common sense that everybody should be able to agree on.
Yeah, so I mean, at Texas Gun Sense, we have our priorities, which are the ones that you're going to hear the coalition talk about today. Right. Safe gun storage, making sure that all guns are locked. Raising the age to 21 to purchase semi-automatic rifles, and that was born out of the Uvalde tragedy. And this entire coalition has promised and committed to supporting those families until that legislation is enacted. So we had conversations about those policies. We also talked about investments in community violence intervention to prevent the daily shootings you don't always hear about in communities hardest hit. And then we also just talked about we have to save energy for defensive work. We can't let any more rollbacks happen to our gun safety laws. That's a real concern in this building. Yeah. So we narrowed it down to a set we felt like was resonant with Texans, doable, important, critical, Yeah.
I know for a lot of us who are in this line of work, it feels like we get to the event and people make the legislative visits, and like part of us is like, great, it's over now, right? But this is not the end of the project. The real work starts when people go back home to their communities, when listeners who are watching get engaged. What are you hoping happens next?
That's always a good question. I mean, what I hope happens next is that the tent just keeps growing, that people who came today come back. They come for hearing, because this is about to get rolling here, right? They come for hearing. They tell their stories at a committee hearing, whether it's on a good bill or a bad one that is harmful. That they organize their friends, that we have double this amount of people next time because all of these people told other people, right? That the work doesn't stop here.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Nicole, you want to leave us with a shameless plug today? Anything you want to, any last words before we close out?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say Texas Gun Sense has been doing this for about 12 years, and we can always use the support. And we love when people join the coalition and support our organization, because we are very ambitious and small. And so Texas Impact has really been an awesome partner and just helping us to grow our capacity, and we just need to keep doing that.
Well, I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate the time. Thanks for all you do, and we'll look forward to some great visits inside.
Thanks.
Hey friends, I'm here with Reverend Stephen Sanders from Oak Hill United Methodist Church here in Austin. Reverend Sanders, you've been an integral part of Texas Impact's Ending Gun Violence team for a couple years now. Why did you choose to get involved in this work?
Scott, it's because I'm a hunter and I'm a gun owner, but I'm also a pastor. So I know the language and the culture of responsible gun ownership, but as a pastor, I also believe that God calls us to be caring for the most vulnerable. And for years, I expected our legislators to do something. Every time there was a tragedy, every time I had to sit with a family where someone had been shot or committed suicide, I wanted legislators to do something. And Uvalde made a shift within me. When Uvalde happened, I wasn't angry, I wasn't numb, I wasn't perturbed. I just felt normal. It was another normal day for me. And when I realized that, I realized there was something wrong within my soul.
Yeah.
And if this was normal for me, and if this is normal for my culture, for our society, then that was a call, I believe, from God to step up and engage in this issue. because I have a foot in both worlds as a gun owner and someone who's been handling guns since he was a little kid, but also as a pastor who cares for people. I realized that I had to engage.
Yeah. So you are engaging. There are thousands of people here engaging today. We're standing in front of the Capitol, in front of a display of names of lives of people who've been lost to gun violence. We just finished a rally. People are going inside to make legislative visits. What are your reflections on today as we stand here in this space?
I think it's powerful, the number of people who have turned out, and the diversity of people, people from all over the state. But quite honestly, one of the things that is most powerful is looking at the display of T-shirts behind us. Those are 1,000 T-shirts of people who would die that represent the lives of people who had died from the hands of gun violence. Yeah. And simply to bring a visual of that and saying, these aren't statistics. These are individual human lives, and people mourn their deaths, and communities grieve and are afraid. And so seeing people coming together and saying, we're not going to settle for this normal that we have, that we have to work to bring about a new normal.
So there are people who are making legislative visits today, have come from all over Texas, and then are going back to their own communities. There are people watching who didn't have a chance to make it today. What do you hope people will do to help end gun violence here in Texas when they go home to their own communities or in the place where they live and work?
I think a couple of things. We often use the phrase thoughts and prayers. Our thoughts and prayers are with you after a situation of gun violence. I ask that we actually take that seriously, and that we do engage our thoughts and prayers. And in our thoughts and prayers, for people who are grieving, that we listen for how God is prompting us to respond. And that we don't take thoughts and prayers to be some token escape of dealing with the real issue.
And then we're done.
But
I'm done.
Let's really think and let's really pray about how God calls us to help keep people safe. That's what this is about. And then I ask that people pick up their phone, or better, write an email to their legislators. If you're able to make a visit to your local legislator's office, to do that and just say, here's where I am. For me, I'm a hunter, I'm a gun owner. If you can do that, and as a gun owner, being able to say, I want us to have basic laws to help keep people safe. Keeping guns out of the hands of dangerous people. Making sure kids can't get a hold of an unstored gun. And just basic laws that still allow people to have guns for appropriate use, but
just
where we're
common
not
sense solutions,
just
right?
common sense basic solutions. And so either pick up the phone, or I had a legislator tell me, send us an email. Send us an email, because then they collect all of that.
Right.
But don't try to make it too long. Just share your heart. But if you're able to go do an in-person visit in your own district, at an office that is staffed, do that. If you're able to come to Austin, do that, because people are going to listen to the representatives. The representatives and senators are going to listen to the voices of people from their districts.
Right.
Someone we have a farm in Kennedy, and the representative from Kennedy is not going to listen to me because I don't vote for him.
Right.
Because I'm not in that district. I've got land there, but I'm not in his district. But visit with your own legislative later.
All right, Pastor, really appreciate the time. Good luck on your visits today.
Thank you.
Let's continue. I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with leaders from the Gun Violence Prevention Advocacy Day. Again, we hope you'll consider joining Texas Impact's gun violence prevention team to continue this work moving forward. And y'all, I just have to say it, every time we record an episode on this topic, I'm reminded of all of the tragedies that we've all had to live through. And we always say that we'll never forget, and I hope that's true, but I hope we'll continue to advocate for common sense gun solutions. Hopefully today will motivate all of us to make some calls, schedule a meeting, or organize some folks in our community to work on this issue. We're going to be updating the action alerts with all of the bills mentioned today as they begin to move, so keep an eye on the Action Center each week, or easier yet, you can sign up for the Rapid Response Team so you can get those emailed to you every Monday. I hope we can count on you to do the work necessary to raise thousands of voices to end gun violence and to work on all of the issues that we're going to be talking about throughout this legislative session and beyond. We hope to see you in Austin for one of our events during the session, or on our weekly Marching Orders Monday, or our rapid response team members in B. Moorhead. Make sure that you sign up for all of it at texasimpact.org. And y'all, make sure you invite some friends to join you in this journey. It's a lot more fun when we're doing this with community, and a lot more impactful if we have a ton of people doing this work with us. Again, you can use the resources on the Action Center page, but invite your friends to join the team that interests them. If you have questions about any of it, please reach out at scott@texasimpact.org. While you're on the website, I hope you'll take a moment to sign up to be a member of Texas Impact. Your membership supports this podcast and all of the work to engage Texans of faith to advocate for a more just and equitable Texas. So with that, I think it's time to close out this episode. So remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnet, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.